In 1980, a 64-year-old cave guide vanished without a trace during what should have been a routine tour of crystal caverns in southeastern Kentucky, leaving 12 terrified tourists stranded in the darkness 600 feet underground. Robert Haskins had led thousands of visitors through those limestone passages over 2 decades, navigating the narrow corridors and cathedral chambers with the confidence of a man who knew every twist, every drop, every hidden danger lurking in the ancient rock. But on that humid August afternoon, somewhere between the Devil's Throat Passage and the Crystal Cathedral, Robert simply disappeared, taking with him answers that would haunt his family and the caving community for nearly a quarter century. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. But 24 years later, a team of experienced spelunkers exploring an unmapped section of the cave system would make a discovery so shocking, so definitive, that it would finally reveal the truth about what happened to Robert Haskins in those dark depths below the Kentucky hills. The morning of August 15th began like any other summer day at Crystal Caverns. The parking lot filled with families seeking relief from the oppressive heat that had settled over the region like a thick blanket. Children pressed against car windows as parents gathered sun hats and water bottles. The caverns offered a constant 54 degrees year-round, a natural air conditioning system that drew visitors from across the tri-state area during the sweltering summer months. Robert Haskins arrived at 7:30 that morning, an hour before the first tour. As was his custom, he unlocked the visitor center, checked the weather reports, and began his daily inspection of the equipment. Safety helmets lined the walls in neat rows, their battery-powered headlamps freshly charged. Coils of rope hung from metal hooks. Backup lighting systems stood ready in their designated alcoves. Robert approached his work with the methodical precision of a man who understood that in the underground world, preparation could mean the difference between life and death. At 64, Robert cut an imposing figure, tall and lean with silver hair and weathered hands that spoke of decades spent working with rope and rock. He had discovered his love for caves during his service in Korea, exploring limestone formations during brief respites from combat. The experience had been transformative, those moments of peace in the underground chambers providing sanctuary from the chaos of war. Upon returning home to Kentucky, he found work in the coal mines, but the caves called to him in a different way. Where mining meant tearing the earth apart, cave guiding meant preserving its ancient secrets while sharing them with others. He joined Crystal Caverns in 1958, when commercial cave tours were still relatively new and safety regulations existed, more as suggestions than requirements. The cave system had been discovered in 1952 by a local farmer whose cattle had wandered near a natural opening in the hillside. Initial explorations revealed the extensive network of passages and chambers, with formations spectacular enough to warrant commercial development. Robert arrived during the early years of operation, when much of the cave remained unmapped and safety protocols were still being developed through trial and error. Robert learned the passages by feel, memorizing every elevation change, every narrow squeeze, every place where the ceiling dropped low enough to catch the unwary. He developed an almost supernatural sense for the cave's moods, reading the subtle signs that indicated changing conditions, shifting water levels, or unstable rock formations. Other guides would joke that Robert could navigate the caves blindfolded, but they said it with respect rather than humor. His knowledge had prevented countless accidents over the years, his careful attention to detail keeping visitors safe in an environment that showed no mercy for carelessness or inexperience. The cave system itself had been formed over millions of years by the patient work of slightly acidic groundwater dissolving limestone bedrock. The process created a three-dimensional maze of passages, chambers, and vertical shafts that extended for miles beneath the Kentucky hills. Water continued to shape the cave even as Robert worked there, carving new channels and occasionally opening passages that had been sealed for centuries. Robert understood these geological processes intimately, explaining to visitors how the cave represented a living system rather than a static museum piece. He could read the rock formations like pages in a book, identifying periods when the region had been covered by ancient seas, when tropical climates had supported different vegetation, when ice ages had altered drainage patterns and groundwater flow. His tours were educational experiences that transformed visitors' understanding of the natural world and the vast timescales over which geological processes operated. Sarah Haskins had grown accustomed to her husband's devotion to the caves. Over their 38 years of marriage, she understood that Robert didn't simply work underground, he communed with it. He would return home each evening with stories of the tours he had led, the families he had introduced to the underground world, the moments of wonder he had witnessed when visitors first glimpsed the massive stalactite formations in the Grand Cathedral or heard their voices echo through the whispering gallery. Their courtship had actually begun because of Robert's passion for caves. Sarah had been part of a church group that visited Crystal Caverns in 1960, and Robert had been their guide. She remembered being struck not just by his knowledge of the geological formations, but by his genuine enthusiasm for sharing that knowledge with others. He had a gift for making complex geological concepts accessible to people without scientific training, using analogies and comparisons that helped visitors understand the incredible natural processes they were witnessing. After their marriage in 1962, Sarah became an integral part of the Crystal Caverns community. She worked in the visitor center during busy seasons, greeting tourists and helping with reservations and scheduling. She understood the business side of cave operations, while Robert focused on the underground aspects. Together they formed a partnership that strengthened both the commercial success of the cave and its reputation for safety and educational value. Their 3 children had grown up with caves as a constant presence in their lives. Robert had taught them to read rock formations, to understand the patient geology that carved these passages over millions of years. He instilled in them a respect for the darkness, an understanding that the underground world demanded humility and preparation from all who entered its domain. Family vacations often involved visits to other cave systems throughout Kentucky, Tennessee, and Virginia, with Robert studying different formation processes and management techniques while the children explored new underground environments. Michael, their eldest son, had briefly considered following his father into cave guiding before ultimately choosing a career in engineering. He retained his father's methodical approach to problem-solving and safety consciousness, but applied these skills to bridge construction rather than underground exploration. David, the middle child, became a teacher, inheriting Robert's gift for making complex subjects understandable to others. Their daughter Patricia pursued nursing, drawn to a profession that required the same careful attention to detail and calm competence under pressure that characterized her father's work. Extended Haskins family gathered regularly for holidays and special occasions, with Robert often regaling them with stories from the caves. He had a seemingly endless supply of tales about unusual visitors, unexpected discoveries, and moments of beauty that could only be experienced in the underground world. His grandchildren were particularly fascinated by these stories, begging for details about blind cave fish, underground waterfalls, and the formations that looked like frozen draperies or organ pipes. Robert's reputation extended throughout the regional caving community. Professional speleologists sought his advice about specific formations or passage characteristics, Amateur cave explorers respected his knowledge and often asked him to accompany them on expeditions to unmapped areas. He had contributed to several scientific papers about karst geology and cave formation processes, though he always insisted that his contributions were practical rather than theoretical. The Crystal Caverns facility itself had evolved significantly during Robert's tenure. What had begun as a simple operation with basic lighting and minimal safety equipment had grown into a modern tourist attraction with sophisticated electrical systems, emergency communication equipment, and professionally designed pathways through the most spectacular sections of the cave. Robert had been instrumental in many of these improvements, using his intimate knowledge of the cave to suggest the safest and most effective routes for visitor traffic. The cave system that tourists experienced represented only a small fraction of the total mapped passages, and the mapped passages represented an even smaller fraction of the cave's true extent. Robert knew that unexplored territory stretched in multiple directions from the commercial tour route, some passages leading to chambers that might rival or exceed the Grand Cathedral in size and beauty. However, commercial cave operations focused on providing safe, predictable experiences for visitors rather than pushing the boundaries of exploration. On the morning of August 15th, Robert prepared for what would be his final tour with the same attention to detail that had characterized his entire career. He checked weather conditions, not because underground conditions were directly affected by surface weather, but because precipitation could influence water levels in certain sections of the cave. Heavy rains could make some passages impassable or dangerous, while drought conditions might reveal passages that were normally flooded. The group that assembled for the 10:15 tour consisted of 12 visitors, a typical summer mix of families and adventure seekers. The Morrison family from Ohio had driven down specifically to visit the caves, their 2 teenage sons excited about their first underground expedition. James Morrison, a high school science teacher, had been looking forward to the educational aspects of the tour, while his wife Linda hoped the cave's constant temperature would provide relief from the heat wave that had made their vacation somewhat uncomfortable. The Henderson family represented the other end of the age spectrum. Roger and Martha Henderson, a retired couple from Louisville, had visited several cave systems across Kentucky and looked forward to adding Crystal Caverns to their collection. They were experienced cave tourists who understood the basic safety requirements and could move through underground passages with confidence and minimal assistance. A young couple on their honeymoon had included the caves as part of their exploration of Kentucky's natural wonders. Tom and Jennifer Walsh were both recent college graduates with degrees in environmental science, and they approached the cave tour with scientific curiosity as well as romantic adventure. They had spent the previous day hiking through Mammoth Cave National Park and were excited to compare different cave systems and formation processes. The remaining visitors included 2 families with young children, all first-time cave explorers, who were both excited and slightly apprehensive about venturing underground. Robert had guided thousands of similar groups over the years, understanding that successful tours required balancing education with entertainment while maintaining absolute focus on safety considerations. Robert conducted his standard safety briefing in the visitor center, explaining the basic rules of cave exploration with the thoroughness that had become his trademark. Stay with the group at all times, maintaining visual contact with both the guide and other tour members. Watch your footing on wet limestone surfaces, understanding that cave floors could be slippery even when they appeared dry. Keep one hand free for balance while moving through narrow passages, using handholds on cave walls rather than trying to catch yourself on other people if you stumbled. Don't touch formations unless specifically invited to do so, as oils from human skin could damage limestone that had taken thousands of years to develop. The chemical processes that created cave formations were delicate and easily disrupted by human interference. Even seemingly harmless actions, like breathing heavily on delicate formations, could alter the microenvironment enough to affect their continued growth. Speak quietly in large chambers to avoid disturbing the delicate acoustic balance that made some chambers natural amphitheaters. Robert explained that some chambers had acoustic properties that could amplify sounds dramatically, and that respectful behavior underground helped preserve the sense of wonder and reverence that the cave environment naturally inspired. The group descended into the cave entrance at exactly 10:15, their helmet lamps creating a constellation of light as they followed Robert into the earth. The temperature drop provided immediate relief from the surface heat, and several visitors commented on the pleasant coolness as they made their way through the entrance hall. Robert used this transition period to help visitors adjust to the underground environment, pointing out the immediate changes in temperature, humidity, and acoustic properties. The entrance hall served as a natural acclimatization chamber, large enough to accommodate groups comfortably while providing their first glimpse of cave formations. Robert pointed out the basic types of speleothems, explaining how stalactites formed as mineral-rich water dripped from the ceiling over thousands of years, while stalagmites grew upward from the floor where those same drops accumulated and evaporated. The most impressive formations occurred where stalactites and stalagmites eventually merged to create columns that connected floor and ceiling. Robert's knowledge of the cave system extended far beyond simple navigation. He understood the geological forces that had created these passages, the patient work of slightly acidic groundwater dissolving limestone over millions of years. He could read the rock formations like pages in a book, explaining how different layers represented different periods in Earth's history, how the presence of certain minerals indicated specific environmental conditions from ages past. The limestone that formed Crystal Caverns had been deposited during the Mississippian period, approximately 350 million years ago, when the region lay beneath a shallow tropical sea. The rock contained fossilized remnants of marine creatures, crinoids and brachiopods, that had lived and died in those ancient waters. Robert often carried a small magnifying glass to help visitors examine these fossils, connecting them to the vast spans of geological time that cave exploration made tangible. As the group moved deeper into the cave, Robert pointed out features that casual observers might miss. The subtle color variations in limestone walls that indicated different mineral content, the delicate soda straws hanging from the ceiling, formations so fragile that a careless touch could destroy decades of growth, the underground streams that continued the slow work of carving new passages through the bedrock. Water played a crucial role in every aspect of cave formation and continued evolution. Robert explained how the cave's hydrology connected to surface drainage patterns, seasonal precipitation, and long-term climate cycles. During wet periods, water levels throughout the cave system could rise dramatically, flooding passages that were normally dry and creating dangerous conditions for anyone caught underground. During dry periods, water levels dropped to reveal chambers and passages that might be inaccessible most of the time. The tour proceeded normally through the first several stops. At Mirapool, the group gathered around the underground lake, their lights reflecting off the perfectly still water surface. Robert explained how the pool served as an indicator of the cave's water table, its level rising and falling with seasonal precipitation patterns. The children in the group were fascinated by the blind cave fish that had evolved in the perpetual darkness, their eyes having disappeared over countless generations of life without light. These cave-adapted creatures represented one of the most remarkable aspects of the underground ecosystem. Robert described how isolation in the cave environment had led to unique evolutionary adaptations, with species developing enhanced senses of touch and chemical detection to compensate for the absence of light. The cave supported a complex food web based on organic matter that washed in from the surface or was carried in by bats that roosted in certain sections of the cave system. Moving through Devil's Throat required single-file navigation, the passage narrowing to barely shoulder width in some places. Robert went first, calling back instructions and encouragement as the visitors carefully made their way through the constricted space. His voice echoed strangely in the narrow corridor, taking on an otherworldly quality that added to the sense of adventure and mild apprehension that such environments naturally inspired. The passage got its name from the way it seemed to swallow sound and light, creating an almost claustrophobic environment that tested some visitors' comfort levels. Robert had developed techniques over the years for helping people with mild claustrophobia navigate such spaces, using breathing exercises and distraction techniques to keep them focused on the journey rather than the confinement. It was somewhere between Devil's Throat and the Grand Cathedral that things went wrong, though exactly what happened would remain a mystery for decades. The group had successfully navigated the narrow passage and was proceeding along a wider corridor when Robert's voice suddenly stopped mid-sentence. The tourists, focused on their footing and the unfamiliar environment, didn't immediately notice the absence of their guide's steady commentary. Mrs. Henderson, walking second in line, was the first to realize something was amiss. She had been listening to Robert explain the formation process of flowstone when his voice simply ceased. She looked up from her careful navigation of the rocky floor to find empty darkness ahead of her. Robert's light, which had been visible just moments before, was nowhere to be seen. The group's confusion quickly turned to concern as they called out Robert's name. Their voices echoed through the passages, creating a disorienting maze of sound that made it impossible to determine direction or distance. The acoustic properties that made some chambers spectacular for experiencing natural sound effects now worked against them, creating multiple echoes that seemed to come from every direction simultaneously. Some members of the group wanted to continue forward, assuming Robert had simply moved ahead more quickly than usual. The teenage Morrison boys were particularly eager to continue exploring, viewing the situation as an adventure rather than a potential emergency. Others, including the Henderson couple with their greater experience of cave tours, advocated for staying in place, fearing they might become more lost by attempting to navigate the cave system without their experienced guide. The debate among the stranded tourists revealed the different levels of cave experience and comfort within the group. Those with outdoor experience understood that getting lost underground could quickly become life-threatening, while those new to cave exploration didn't fully grasp the potential dangers of their situation. The cave environment that had seemed welcoming and controllable under Robert's guidance suddenly felt alien and threatening. What followed was 6 hours of growing panic as the reality of their situation became clear. They were trapped underground without proper knowledge of the cave layout, dependent on battery-powered lights that wouldn't last indefinitely. The temperature that had seemed so pleasant upon entry now felt oppressive, the darkness beyond their small circles of light taking on a malevolent presence. The group's initial attempts at self-rescue quickly proved futile. The passages that had seemed straightforward under Robert's guidance became a confusing maze when navigated without expert knowledge. Sound behaved strangely in the cave environment, making it difficult to determine whether voices or footsteps were coming from nearby passages or distant chambers. The limestone walls all looked similar in their helmet lamp beams, making it impossible to identify landmarks or maintain a sense of direction. As hours passed, the psychological pressure of their situation began to affect different members of the group in various ways. The younger visitors oscillated between excitement and fear, treating their predicament as either a grand adventure or a terrifying ordeal depending on their moment-to-moment emotional state. The adults struggled with responsibility for the children's safety while dealing with their own growing anxiety about their situation. Battery life became a constant concern as the hours dragged on. The helmet lamps that had seemed so reliable at the beginning of the tour now represented finite resources that were steadily diminishing. Group members began turning off their lights periodically to conserve power, experiencing the absolute darkness of the cave environment. The silence and blackness were so complete that some visitors reported feeling disoriented about basic physical sensations like which direction was up. Above ground, Sarah Haskins began to worry when Robert failed to return from his morning tour. It wasn't unusual for tours to run slightly long, especially with particularly curious groups, but by 4 o'clock in the afternoon, her concern had escalated to genuine alarm. Robert was meticulous about maintaining schedules, understanding that delayed tours could affect the entire day's operations and inconvenience other visitors. She contacted the cave office, speaking with Tom Bradley, the operations manager, who immediately recognized the seriousness of the situation. Robert's reliability was legendary among the Crystal Cavern staff. If he was significantly late returning from a tour, something had definitely gone wrong. Tom immediately suspended all other cave operations and began organizing a search team. The initial response involved cave staff members who were familiar with the tourist route. They entered the cave system from multiple access points, using powerful lights and communication equipment to conduct a systematic search of all known passages. Their calls echoed through the limestone corridors as they attempted to locate both Robert and the missing tourists. The rescue operation that followed involved local emergency services, experienced cavers from throughout the region, and specialized equipment brought in from Louisville. Search teams entered the cave from multiple points, using powerful lights and communication equipment to coordinate their efforts. Cave rescue operations required specialized knowledge and equipment that wasn't available through standard emergency services, necessitating the involvement of volunteer cavers with technical rescue training. The Kentucky Cave Rescue Team, a volunteer organization of experienced spelunkers trained in underground emergency response, arrived within hours of being contacted. These volunteers brought sophisticated equipment, including portable radio systems designed for underground use, specialized medical supplies adapted for cave environments, and technical climbing gear for navigating vertical sections of the cave system. They found the stranded tourists huddled together in a side passage near the Grand Cathedral, exhausted and frightened, but otherwise unharmed. The group had managed to stay together and avoid the potentially fatal mistake of splitting up to search for their missing guide. Their discipline in remaining in one location had prevented the situation from becoming even more dangerous, though they were suffering from hypothermia due to prolonged exposure to the cave's constant 54-degree temperature. The visitors' accounts of Robert's disappearance were frustratingly vague. They remembered his voice cutting off suddenly somewhere between Devil's Throat and the main chamber, but the disorienting nature of the cave environment made it difficult to pinpoint exact locations or timing. Some thought they had heard a sound like falling rock, while others insisted the silence had been complete and sudden. The rescue team's debriefing of the tourists revealed how quickly disorientation could occur in the cave environment. Visitors who had felt confident about their location while following, Robert discovered they had no clear memory of the route they had taken or the specific passages they had traversed. The uniform appearance of limestone walls and the acoustic distortions of the underground environment had prevented them from forming reliable mental maps of their journey. Extensive search efforts continued for weeks following the incident. Teams explored every known passage in the cave system, following leads that proved to be dead ends, investigating side passages that hadn't been entered in years. They brought in specialized equipment including underwater cameras to explore the deeper pools and sophisticated listening devices to detect any sounds that might indicate Robert's location. The searches revealed just how complex the cave system truly was. Passages twisted and interconnected in ways that hadn't been fully mapped, with elevation changes and water features that created a three-dimensional maze beneath the Kentucky hills. Several previously unknown chambers were discovered during the search efforts, expanding the known extent of the cave system by hundreds of feet, but none yielded any trace of the missing guide. Cave survey teams created detailed maps of areas that had been explored only casually in previous years. The search operation provided an opportunity to document sections of the cave that hadn't been systematically mapped, revealing connections between passages that had been previously unknown. This mapping work would prove valuable for future cave management and safety planning, though it provided no immediate answers about Robert's fate. The search teams encountered numerous hazards that illustrated the inherent dangers of cave exploration. Unstable rock formations threatened to collapse without warning. Water-filled passages required specialized diving equipment to explore safely. Vertical drops and climbing sections demanded technical rope work and safety systems. The environment that Robert had navigated confidently for over 20 years revealed itself to be filled with potential death traps for the unwary or inexperienced. Robert's family endured the agonizing uncertainty that comes with unexplained disappearance. Without a body or clear evidence of what had occurred, they were left in a painful limbo between hope and grief. Sarah found herself scanning newspaper reports of cave discoveries, hoping that somehow Robert had survived and found his way to a different cave system. The possibility seemed remote, but the absence of definitive proof left room for desperate hope. The adult children struggled with the impossibility of achieving closure without definitive answers. Michael took leave from his engineering job to participate in search efforts, using his technical skills to assist with equipment and logistics. David coordinated communication with media outlets and other family members, while Patricia helped her mother cope with the emotional trauma of the situation. The extended family rallied around Sarah during the crisis, with relatives and friends providing practical support and emotional comfort. The Crystal Caverns community also offered assistance, with current and former employees contributing to search efforts and providing financial support for the family during the extended period when operations were suspended. The caving community was equally shaken by Robert's disappearance. He had been a respected figure in cave exploration and commercial guiding, known for his safety consciousness and thorough knowledge of cave systems. If someone with Robert's experience could simply vanish underground, it raised uncomfortable questions about the inherent dangers of cave exploration and the adequacy of existing safety protocols. Professional speleologists from across the region contributed to the search efforts, bringing specialized equipment and expertise to the operation. The incident highlighted the informal nature of cave rescue resources and the need for more systematic emergency response capabilities. Several organizations began developing improved training programs and equipment standards based on lessons learned during the search for Robert. Crystal Caverns suspended operations for several months following the incident. The cave entrance was sealed to prevent unauthorized access while search operations continued, and the visitor center was closed indefinitely. The economic impact on the local community was significant, as the cave attraction had been a major source of tourism revenue and employment. When tours eventually resumed, they implemented enhanced safety measures, including mandatory backup guides. Improved communication systems and more frequent head counts. Two-way radio systems were installed throughout the tourist sections of the cave, allowing guides to maintain constant contact with surface personnel. Emergency supply caches were positioned at strategic locations along the tour route, containing backup lighting, first aid supplies, and communication equipment. The cave industry as a whole began to take a more serious look at safety standards, though comprehensive regulations wouldn't be developed for several more years. Robert's disappearance became a case study in cave safety courses, illustrating the importance of redundant safety systems and emergency preparedness even in seemingly familiar and controlled environments. Theories about Robert's fate circulated throughout the caving community. Some suggested he might have suffered a medical emergency and fallen into an unmapped passage or underground stream. Others wondered if he had discovered something unusual and gone to investigate, becoming lost in unfamiliar territory. The possibility of foul play was considered but dismissed due to the isolated nature of the cave environment and Robert's well-established reputation. Geological specialists theorized about hidden hazards that might exist in the cave system. Limestone. Formations were inherently unstable over geological timescales, with solution processes continually weakening rock structures. It was possible that Robert had encountered a collapse or sinkhole that hadn't been detected during previous explorations of the cave system. As months turned to years, the search efforts gradually diminished. The official investigation remained. Open but active searching was suspended after no new evidence emerged. The Kentucky Cave Rescue Team maintained the case in their files, with periodic reviews to determine whether new search techniques or equipment might warrant renewed efforts. Robert Haskins was eventually declared legally dead 7 years after his disappearance, though his family never fully accepted this conclusion without definitive proof of his fate. The legal declaration allowed Sarah to settle insurance matters and begin the process of rebuilding her life, but the emotional uncertainty continued to affect the entire family. The mystery took on an almost legendary quality within the caving community. Robert's disappearance became a cautionary tale told to new cave guides, a reminder of the unknown dangers that could lurk even in familiar territory. Some claim to have seen his ghost in the depths of Crystal Caverns, a benevolent spirit still, watching over visitors in his domain. Ghost stories aside, Robert's disappearance had a profound impact on cave safety practices throughout the region. Commercial cave operations implemented new protocols based on lessons learned from the incident. Guide training programs were expanded to include emergency response procedures and risk assessment techniques. Communication systems were upgraded to ensure that guides could maintain contact with surface personnel throughout their tours. Sarah Haskins struggled to rebuild her life in the shadow of unanswered questions. She found some solace in connecting with other families who had lost loved ones in cave accidents, understanding the unique challenges of grief complicated by mystery. Through these connections, she became an advocate for improved cave safety standards, working with organizations to develop better training programs for commercial guides and enhanced emergency protocols. The support group Sarah joined included families from across the country who had experienced similar losses. Cave accidents, while relatively rare, created unique challenges for survivors due to the difficulty of recovery operations and the often remote locations where incidents occurred. The group provided both emotional support and practical advocacy. For improved safety standards, Sarah's advocacy work led to her involvement with the National Cave Association, where she contributed to the development of industry safety standards. Her practical experience as the spouse of a cave guide, combined with her first-hand knowledge of the devastating impact of cave accidents, provided valuable perspective for safety policy development. The children grew up and established their own families, but Robert's disappearance remained a defining absence in their lives. They would gather each year on the anniversary of his disappearance, sharing memories and wondering what had become of their father. Some maintained hope that answers might eventually emerge, while others found peace in accepting the mystery as part of their father's final gift, ensuring he would forever remain part of the caves he loved. Michael's engineering career was influenced by his father's disappearance, leading him to specialize in safety systems and risk analysis. His work on bridge construction projects always included extensive analysis of potential failure modes and redundant safety systems, approaches that were directly influenced by the uncertainty about what had gone wrong during his father's final tour. David incorporated lessons about uncertainty and resilience into his teaching, helping students understand that life sometimes included unanswered questions that required emotional strength rather than analytical solutions. His classroom became a place where students could explore difficult topics, including loss, mystery, and the limits of human knowledge. Patricia's nursing career provided her with professional tools for helping families cope with medical emergencies and unexplained losses. Her personal experience with unresolved grief gave her special empathy for families facing similar challenges, and she often served as an informal counselor for colleagues dealing with difficult cases. The cave itself continued to evolve during the decades following Robert's disappearance. Water levels fluctuated with seasonal changes and longer climate patterns. New formations grew slowly in the constant darkness, while others gradually dissolved back into the limestone matrix. Passages that had been stable for centuries occasionally shifted as the patient geological forces continued their ancient work. Hydrological changes affected the cave system in subtle but significant ways. Extended periods of drought could lower water tables and reveal previously flooded passages, while unusual precipitation patterns could create temporary waterfalls and alter the acoustic properties of certain chambers. These changes reminded cave managers that underground environments were dynamic systems rather than static museum displays. Amateur cavers and professional explorers continued to push the boundaries of the known cave system. New passages were discovered and mapped, extending the total known length of the cave by several miles. These explorations were conducted with modern safety equipment and communication systems that had been unavailable during Robert's era, but they still carried inherent risks that reminded explorers of the cave's potential dangers. The exploration teams that worked in crystal caverns during the 1980s and 1990s included geologists, hydrologists, and professional speleologists who contributed to scientific understanding of cave formation processes. Their research provided insights into the complex geological history of the region and the ongoing processes that continued to shape the underground environment. In 1995, a team of experienced spelunkers from the University of Kentucky received permission to explore an unmapped section of the Crystal Caverns system. The team consisted of graduate students in geology and experienced amateur cavers, all working under the supervision of Dr. Margaret Chen, a professor specializing in karst, topography, and cave formation. Dr. Chen had been following the Robert Haskins case for years, both as a scientist interested in cave hazards and as someone who had known Robert professionally. She had consulted on the original search efforts, providing expertise about cave hydrology and geological processes that might have affected his disappearance. The opportunity to conduct systematic exploration of unmapped sections of the cave represented both scientific advancement and a continued search for answers about Robert's fate. The exploration team had spent months preparing for their expedition, studying maps of the known cave system and identifying areas where unexplored passages might connect to the main chambers. They were particularly interested in a series of passages that seemed to continue beyond the currently mapped boundaries, potentially connecting to other cave systems in the region. Geological surveys of the surrounding area suggested that the cave system extended much further than the mapped portions indicated. Ground-penetrating radar and seismic analysis had identified potential void spaces that might represent unmapped chambers or connecting passages. The scientific exploration would provide valuable data about cave formation processes while potentially revealing new areas where Robert might have encountered difficulties. The team entered the caves on a crisp October morning, carrying modern equipment that would have seemed like science fiction during Robert's era. They had GPS units adapted for underground use, digital cameras capable of functioning in complete darkness, and communication systems that could maintain contact with surface teams. Their safety protocols included redundant backup systems and predetermined check-in schedules. The difference between their equipment and what had been available to Robert in 1980 was dramatic. Modern cave exploration benefited from advances in lighting technology, communication systems, geological surveying equipment, and emergency rescue techniques. These improvements had made cave exploration significantly safer, though inherent geological hazards remained unchanged. Led by Team Captain Jake Morrison, a graduate student who had spent years exploring cave systems throughout Kentucky and Tennessee, the group made their way through the familiar tourist sections of Crystal Caverns before branching off into unmapped territory. They moved slowly and methodically, carefully documenting their progress and maintaining detailed records of their discoveries. Jake's experience included cave rescue training and technical climbing skills that allowed him to navigate vertical sections of cave systems safely. His team members had complementary expertise in geology, hydrology, and cave photography, creating a well-rounded exploration unit capable of conducting comprehensive scientific surveys while maintaining high safety standards. The passage they followed twisted away from the main cave system, descending gradually through a series of interconnected chambers. The rock formations in this section were different from the tourist areas, featuring more dramatic mineral deposits and unusual geological structures that suggested different formation processes or environmental conditions during their development. These formations provided valuable scientific data about the geological history of the region. Different mineral compositions and formation patterns indicated varying water chemistry and flow patterns during different periods of the cave's development. The team collected samples and measurements that would contribute to broader understanding of karst geology and cave formation processes. As they pushed deeper into unmapped territory, the team discovered chambers that appeared to have been untouched by human presence. Delicate formations grew undisturbed from ceiling and walls, creating cathedral-like spaces filled with limestone sculptures that had been developing for thousands of years. The silence in these deep chambers was profound, broken only by the occasional drip of water and the soft sounds of their movement. The pristine condition of these chambers provided opportunities to study cave formation processes without the complications introduced by human traffic. Tourist areas of caves were inevitably affected by the presence of visitors, with changes in air circulation, humidity, and chemical composition altering the microenvironment in subtle but measurable ways. It was Jake Morrison who first spotted something unusual in a chamber they had designated as Room 7 on their hand-drawn maps. His powerful LED headlamp illuminated a section of broken floor where the limestone had apparently collapsed, creating an irregular opening that dropped away into darkness below. The formation didn't appear natural, lacking the smooth edges and gradual transitions typical of water-carved passages. The discovery immediately caught the attention of the entire team. Collapse features in cave systems could indicate geological instability or unusual formation processes. They could also represent hazards for cave explorers, creating hidden dangers that weren't apparent until someone stepped on apparently solid ground that proved to be unstable. The team gathered around the opening, training their lights downward to examine the cavity below. The limestone around the edges showed signs of recent collapse, with sharp fragments and angular surfaces that indicated the failure had been sudden rather than gradual. This type of formation, known as a sinkhole or collapse feature, could be extremely dangerous for unwary explorers. Dr. Chen had encountered similar formations in other cave systems, understanding that they represented zones where underlying geological processes had weakened rock structures over time. The collapse might have been triggered by changes in water flow, seismic activity, or simply the gradual dissolution of supporting limestone structures. As they examined the opening more carefully, team member Lisa Park noticed something reflecting their lights from the depths below. She adjusted her headlamp beam and called for the others to direct their lights toward the same area. There, approximately 20 feet down in the collapsed chamber, something metallic caught and reflected their illumination. The metallic reflection was unmistakable against the natural limestone surfaces of the collapsed chamber. Metal objects were extremely rare in cave environments, limited to equipment left by explorers or, in very rare cases, geological specimens containing metallic minerals. The object's location in a collapse cavity suggested it might be related to human activity rather than natural geological processes. The team established safety protocols before attempting to investigate the anomaly below. They secured climbing ropes and tested the stability of the limestone around the collapse opening. The rock around the edges appeared stable, but cave formations could be deceptive, with apparently solid surfaces concealing underlying weaknesses. Jake Morrison, the most experienced climber in the group, volunteered to descend into the cavity, while the others maintained safety positions above. Cave rescue protocols required multiple backup systems and constant communication between team members, particularly when investigating potentially unstable formations. As Jake rappelled down into the collapsed chamber, his lights revealed a space that appeared to have been sealed off from the main cave system for years. The air was still and stagnant, lacking the subtle air currents that typically moved through connected cave passages. Mineral deposits on the walls suggested that water had once flowed through this area, but the formations appeared dormant and undisturbed. The chamber showed signs of having been isolated for an extended period. Formations that would have been actively growing in a connected cave environment appeared dormant, indicating that the hydrological processes that fed their development had been interrupted. The collapse had apparently sealed the chamber off from the water sources that had originally carved it. The metallic object that had caught their attention from above proved to be partially buried under limestone debris from the collapse. Jake carefully cleared away loose rock and sediment, working slowly to avoid disturbing what was clearly an important discovery. Cave archaeology required careful documentation and preservation of context, as any disturbance could destroy valuable information about how artifacts had come to be positioned. As more of the object became visible, its identity became unmistakable. It was an old-style carbide lamp of the type used by cave guides and miners in earlier decades. The brass fixture was tarnished but intact, its reflector still capable of focusing light despite years in the underground environment. The lamp bore the distinctive markings of a manufacturer that had stopped producing cave equipment in the early 1980s. The discovery sent shockwaves through the exploration team. Carbide lamps had been standard equipment for professional cave guides during the 1970s and early 1980s, before being largely replaced by electric systems. The lamp's design and manufacture date suggested it had been lost sometime during the period when Robert Haskins had disappeared. Jake's radio crackled as he reported his discovery to the team above. The implications were immediately apparent to everyone involved. This was equipment that had been used by professional cave guides during the era when Crystal Caverns had first opened to the public. The lamp's location in a collapsed chamber suggested it had been lost during some kind of accident or incident. The team spent the next several hours carefully documenting their discovery. They photographed the lamp from multiple angles, recorded its exact position relative to the collapse opening, and collected samples of the surrounding sediment for later analysis. The lamp appeared to have been buried gradually rather than suddenly, suggesting the collapse had occurred over time rather than in a single catastrophic event. Dr. Chen arrived at the cave the following day to examine the discovery personally. As an expert in cave formation and the history of Kentucky's cave systems, she immediately recognized the significance of the find. The lamp's design and manufacture date suggested it had been lost sometime in the late 1970s or early 1980s, precisely the period when Robert Haskins had disappeared. The discovery prompted a renewed investigation into Robert's disappearance. Local authorities, working with cave experts and the original search team members who were still available, began to piece together the implications of finding his equipment in an unmapped section of the cave system. The location of the lamp, combined with the evidence of a limestone collapse, suggested a scenario that investigators had not previously considered. Geological analysis of the collapse site revealed that the limestone floor in this section of the cave had been weakened by underground water flow over many years. The formation of what geologists termed a solution cavity had gradually undermined the structural integrity of the rock, creating a hidden void beneath what appeared to be solid cave floor. The geological processes that created the collapse were well understood, but extremely difficult to predict or detect without specialized equipment. Slightly acidic groundwater had dissolved limestone along fracture lines and bedding planes, creating a cavity that gradually expanded over thousands of years. The overlying rock had maintained its structural integrity until some triggering event caused sudden failure. The collapse appeared to have occurred suddenly, possibly triggered by the weight and movement of someone walking across what they believed to be stable ground. The limestone had given way without warning, creating a natural trap that would have been impossible to detect or avoid without specialized equipment. For someone with Robert's experience, such a hidden danger would have been particularly shocking because it occurred in an area that appeared safe and stable. The investigation team used ground-penetrating radar and specialized cave mapping equipment to survey the entire collapse area. They discovered that the cavity extended further than initially apparent, suggesting that Robert had fallen into a complex chamber system that had been sealed off from the main cave by the limestone collapse. The size and complexity of the collapsed chamber system indicated that Robert would have had little chance of survival even if he had initially survived the fall. The chamber appeared to have no connections to the main cave system, meaning that rescue would have been impossible even if his location had been known immediately after the accident. Recovery efforts focused on the sealed chamber proved challenging due to the unstable nature of the collapsed debris. Engineers were brought in to assess the safety of attempting to excavate the area, and specialized equipment was positioned to monitor any further geological movement. The process required extreme caution because additional collapses could endanger rescue personnel while potentially destroying evidence. The engineering analysis revealed that the collapse site remained geologically active with ongoing settlement and potential for further failures. Any attempt to excavate the chamber would require extensive stabilization work that could take months to complete and might not ultimately be successful in recovering remains. Sarah Haskins, now 78 years old, received word of the discovery. With a mixture of relief and renewed grief, After 24 years of uncertainty, she finally had concrete evidence of her husband's fate. The discovery confirmed that Robert had died in the line of duty, the victim of a geological hazard that couldn't have been predicted or prevented with the knowledge and equipment available in 1980. The confirmation of Robert's death allowed Sarah to finally complete the grieving process that had been suspended by uncertainty for nearly a quarter century. While the discovery brought renewed sadness, it also provided the closure she needed to fully honor Robert's memory and celebrate his life, rather than remaining trapped by unanswered questions. The Haskins children, now adults with families of their own, gathered to process this new information about their father's disappearance. For them, the discovery represented both closure and renewed loss. They could finally understand what had happened to Robert, but the knowledge also meant definitively letting go of any lingering hope for his survival. Michael found professional meaning in the discovery, using his engineering expertise to understand the geological processes that had caused the collapse. His work on structural safety systems took on new personal significance as he applied lessons learned from his father's accident to protecting others from similar hidden dangers. David incorporated the experience into his teaching, helping students understand how scientific investigation could provide answers to long-standing mysteries, while also illustrating the patience and persistence required for meaningful research. The discovery became a powerful example of how systematic investigation could yield results, even decades after initial efforts had been unsuccessful. Patricia found that her professional experience in nursing helped her cope with the definitive news about her father's death. Her understanding of grief and loss, developed through years of helping patients and families cope with medical tragedies, provided tools for processing the complex emotions associated with finally learning the truth about Robert's fate. The recovery team ultimately decided that attempting to excavate Robert's remains would be too dangerous and potentially destructive to the cave environment he had devoted his life to protecting. Instead, they chose to seal the collapse area and designate it as a memorial site. A bronze plaque was installed in the Grand Cathedral, honoring Robert's years of service and his commitment to sharing the underground world with others. The decision to leave Robert's remains in the cave felt appropriate to his family and colleagues. He had spent his career in the underground environment, and leaving him there honored his connection to the caves while avoiding the risks and environmental damage that excavation would have entailed. The geological investigation revealed important insights about cave safety that influenced industry practices for years to come. The discovery of hidden solution cavities and the potential for sudden limestone collapse led to enhanced surveying techniques and safety protocols for commercial cave operations. Robert's accident, while tragic, contributed to improved safety standards that would protect future cave guides and visitors. Ground-penetrating radar surveys became standard practice for commercial cave operations, helping to identify potential collapse hazards before they could endanger guides or visitors. The technology that could have detected the cavity that claimed Robert's life became an essential tool for cave safety management. Crystal Caverns implemented new safety measures based on the lessons learned from Robert's accident. Ground-penetrating radar surveys were conducted throughout the tourist sections of the cave to identify potential hazards. Enhanced guide training programs included education about geological risks and emergency response procedures. Communication equipment was upgraded to ensure that guides could maintain contact with surface personnel throughout their tours. The cave industry as a whole adopted many of these improvements, recognizing that Robert's experience and knowledge had not been sufficient to protect him from a hazard that couldn't be detected without modern technology. Professional organizations developed new certification requirements for cave guides and established ongoing safety education programs. Dr. Chen's research into the collapse mechanism contributed to the broader understanding of karst geology and cave formation processes. Her findings were published in geological journals and presented at conferences, ensuring that the knowledge gained from this tragedy would benefit the scientific community and improve cave safety worldwide. The scientific papers that resulted from the investigation became standard references for cave safety research and geological hazard assessment. Robert's accident provided a case study that helped other researchers understand the mechanisms of limestone collapse and develop improved methods for detecting geological hazards in cave environments. For the caving community, Robert's story evolved from an unsolved mystery into a teachable moment about the ongoing risks inherent in underground exploration. His dedication to cave safety and visitor education became part of his legacy, inspiring a new generation of guides to approach their work with even greater consciousness of the potential dangers and their responsibilities to the people they led underground. Cave guide training programs incorporated Robert's story as an example of how hidden geological hazards could threaten even experienced professionals. His accident became a reminder that cave safety required constant vigilance and the best available technology rather than relying solely on experience and knowledge of familiar territory. The memorial plaque in Crystal Caverns became a pilgrimage site for cave guides and enthusiasts from around the world. Robert's story resonated with people who understood the deep connection between experienced cavers and the underground environments they explored. His sacrifice in the line of duty represented the ultimate commitment to sharing the wonder and beauty of the cave world with others. Annual memorial gatherings at Crystal Caverns brought together cave guides, rescue personnel, and safety advocates to honor Robert's memory and renew their commitment to cave safety. These events provided opportunities to share new safety techniques and technologies while maintaining focus on the human cost of cave accidents. Sarah Haskins found peace in understanding that her husband had died doing what he loved, sharing his passion for caves with a group of visitors who had trusted him to guide them safely through the underground world. While the 24 years of uncertainty had been difficult, the discovery of his lamp provided the closure she needed to fully celebrate his life and contributions, rather than remaining trapped by unanswered questions. The closure allowed Sarah to establish a scholarship fund in Robert's memory, supporting students who were pursuing careers in geology, cave science, or cave safety. The scholarship program ensured that Robert's commitment to education and safety would continue to benefit future generations of cave professionals. The discovery also highlighted how much cave exploration and safety had advanced since 1980. Modern equipment, communication systems, and geological surveying techniques would have detected the hidden cavity that claimed Robert's life. His accident served as a reminder of how dangerous cave exploration had been for earlier generations and how much progress had been made in protecting both guides and visitors. Today, Crystal Caverns continues to operate as a commercial cave system, welcoming thousands of visitors each year to experience the underground world that Robert Haskins loved and protected. The safety improvements implemented following the discovery of his lamp have prevented similar accidents, ensuring that future generations can explore the caves with significantly reduced risk. Robert's legacy lives on in the enhanced safety standards he inadvertently helped establish, the geological knowledge gained from investigating his accident, and the memorial that honors his commitment to cave education and preservation. His disappearance, once a mystery that haunted the caving community, became a foundation for improvements that have saved countless lives and made cave exploration safer for everyone who ventures into the underground world. The lamp discovery in 2004 marked the end of one of Kentucky's most enduring cave mysteries, but it also began a new chapter in cave safety and geological understanding. Robert Haskins had spent his career introducing people to the wonders hidden beneath the Earth's surface, and even in death, he continued to contribute to the protection and preservation of the underground world he had dedicated his life to sharing with others.